You are a human baby. You cannot walk, talk, feed yourself, or even regulate your own body temperature. You have no idea what a predator is, but predators know exactly what you are. At birth, you weigh only about 3 kilograms. By nature standards, you're not built to survive alone. And yet somehow, you have ancestors. Thousands of generations of them. Somewhere in the distant past, our ancestors solved one of evolution's hardest problems, keeping a helpless newborn alive. Not for days or weeks, but long enough to grow up, have children of their own, and repeat that process for more than 300,000 years. So this isn't just an interesting question, it's a personal one. If even one of your direct ancestors had failed to protect their child just once, you wouldn't exist today. What's truly remarkable is how they managed to do it. Without hospitals, antibiotics, vaccines, or even the slightest understanding of germs. Their success wasn't simply the result of love. Almost every animal protects its young. What humans developed was something far more extraordinary, one of the most sophisticated childcare systems ever seen in the natural world. Ironically, many parts of that system have quietly disappeared from modern life. So how did ancient humans keep the most helpless babies on Earth alive? Most animals are born ready to move. A baby giraffe stands within an hour. A foal is running within 2. Even chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, cling tightly to their mothers almost immediately after birth. Human babies are completely different. For months, they depend on others for absolutely everything. That isn't a flaw. It's one of evolution's most important trade-offs. Scientists have a name for this: secondary altriciality. Human babies are born much earlier in their development than almost any other primate because our brains are simply too large. If they continued developing inside the womb, childbirth would become nearly impossible. Evolution solved the problem by shortening pregnancy instead. At birth, a human brain is only about 25% of its adult size, compared with roughly 45% in chimpanzees. That means much of our brain development happens outside the womb, while infants remain completely dependent on constant care. This created a challenge unlike anything seen in most other mammals. No single parent could hunt, gather food, avoid predators, and care for a helpless newborn alone. Humans didn't survive because individuals became stronger. We survived because communities did. And that changed everything. You've probably heard the phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child." Today it sounds like a comforting proverb, but for early humans it was a biological necessity. Anthropologists call this strategy cooperative breeding, and many believe it gave Homo sapiens a major evolutionary advantage over other human species. Unlike most primates, where mothers carry almost the entire burden of raising offspring, hunter-gatherer societies shared childcare across the whole community. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, older siblings, aunts, uncles, and even unrelated adults all helped care for children. This wasn't generosity, it was survival. Grandmothers were especially important. Their contribution became so significant that scientists developed the grandmother hypothesis, which suggests that human females evolved to live long after their reproductive years because helping raise grandchildren increased the survival of their own family line. Studies of traditional hunter-gatherer societies strongly support this idea, showing that children with a maternal grandmother nearby often had much higher survival rates. Childcare wasn't limited to grandparents. Children were constantly carried, watched, fed, and protected by different members of the group throughout the day. In some modern hunter-gatherer societies, such as the AKA people of Central Africa, fathers spend nearly half of their day within arm's reach of their infants, far more than in many industrialized societies today. In other words, ancient children didn't depend on two parents alone. They grew up surrounded by an entire network of caregivers. Their survival wasn't built on individual effort, but on cooperation. That same spirit of cooperation shaped another crucial part of childhood: feeding. And ancient breastfeeding looked very different from what most of us consider normal today. Breastfeeding in prehistoric societies looked nothing like it does in much of the modern world. Children were commonly nursed for 2, 3, or even 4 years. From an evolutionary perspective, weaning before the age of 2 was probably the exception, not the rule. Feeding was also far more frequent. Instead of eating every few hours, infants often nursed whenever they showed signs of hunger. Breast milk provided far more than nutrition. It kept babies hydrated, strengthened their immune systems, regulated stress, and naturally delayed the mother's next pregnancy, usually spacing births by 3 to 4 years. That spacing was critical. A hunter-gatherer mother simply couldn't carry two completely dependent infants across long distances while searching for food. Evolution favored families that gave each child enough time to become stronger before another baby arrived. Ancient communities also practiced wet nursing. If a mother became ill, died, or couldn't produce enough milk, another woman in the group often breastfed the child. A baby's survival didn't depend on one person, it depended on the community. But feeding solved only part of the problem. Ancient parents still faced another challenge. How do you protect a completely helpless baby while walking for miles through a landscape filled with predators? The answer was surprisingly effective. They almost never put the baby down, ever. Hunter-gatherer mothers carried their babies tightly against their chest or back for most of the day. Constant physical contact kept infants warm, protected, and close enough to feed whenever necessary. A baby left alone couldn't regulate its temperature, defend itself, or escape danger. Even crying could attract predators. Modern science suggests our bodies still expect this ancient arrangement. Skin-to-skin contact helps regulate a baby's heart rate, breathing, body temperature, and stress hormones. Babies who are carried throughout the day also tend to cry less, not because they're spoiled, but because close contact satisfies a biological need shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Even the newborn grasping reflex may be a reminder of that past. A baby's instinctive grip likely evolved to help it stay attached to a caregiver. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies consistently find that infants are rarely left alone. For almost all of human history, being held wasn't special treatment, it was simply normal. Eventually, though, every child reached the same milestone. Milk alone was no longer enough. When ancient babies were ready for solid food, there were no jars of baby food or carefully prepared meals. Parents simply used whatever nature had provided that day. One of the oldest feeding techniques was pre-mastication. Adults chewed meat, roots, fruits, or other foods until they became soft enough for a baby to swallow, then passed the food directly to the infant. While this sounds unusual today, it was one of the safest ways to feed a child who couldn't yet chew. Researchers now believe the practice may even have offered unexpected benefits by transferring helpful bacteria that supported the development of a baby's immune system. Chimpanzees still display similar behavior today, suggesting the practice may be millions of years old. As children grew stronger, their diet expanded to include bone marrow, mashed tubers, soft fruits, eggs, fish, insects, and small pieces of cooked meat. Surprisingly, archaeological evidence suggests that many hunter-gatherer children actually had healthier teeth than children living in the first farming societies, where diets became heavily dependent on grains. But food was only one challenge. Night brought a completely different set of dangers. Temperatures dropped, predators became more active, and the youngest members of the group were at their most vulnerable. So where did ancient babies sleep? For almost all of human history, they almost never slept alone. Instead of separate nurseries or cribs, infants slept beside or directly against their caregivers. Today we call this co-sleeping, but for our ancestors it wasn't a parenting choice. It was simply normal life. Sleeping close to another person provided warmth, protection, and easy access to breastfeeding throughout the night. Modern research also shows that close nighttime contact helps regulate a baby's breathing, heart rate, and body temperature. While modern medicine warns that co-sleeping can be dangerous in certain environments, prehistoric sleeping conditions were very different. Firm natural bedding and constant awareness meant the risks were not the same as those found in modern bedrooms. Whatever the exact reasons, one fact remains clear. Human babies evolved expecting to spend the night close to another human being. For hundreds of thousands of years, sleeping alone wasn't normal. It was dangerous. Even with all this care, however, ancient parents still faced a heartbreaking reality. Many children never reached adulthood. The truth is that ancient humans lost many children. Archaeologists estimate that in prehistoric societies, between 30 and 50% of children died before the age of 5. Those numbers are heartbreaking, but they don't mean ancient parents cared any less. They simply lived in a world without antibiotics, vaccines, clean water, or any understanding of bacteria and viruses. Even so, they weren't completely helpless. Long before written medicine, humans had learned through observation that certain plants could reduce pain, ease fevers, or help wounds heal. Honey was used as a natural antimicrobial treatment, and willow bark relieved pain centuries before anyone understood the chemistry behind it. Ancient communities also relied on rituals surrounding birth and childhood. Today, these traditions may seem symbolic, but they served an important purpose. They united the group around the child, reinforced shared responsibility, and helped families cope with the unimaginable grief of losing a son or daughter. Archaeology tells a surprisingly emotional story. Infant burials have been found carefully prepared, often with beads, shells, flowers, or treasured objects placed beside the child. These weren't societies that accepted death without emotion. They mourned deeply, and they passed what they learned from one generation to the next, slowly improving the chances that the next child would survive. Perhaps the most surprising part of the story is that modern science is rediscovering many of the same principles our ancestors followed naturally. Today, doctors encourage skin-to-skin contact because it stabilizes a newborn's heart rate, breathing, body temperature, and stress levels. Health organizations recommend breastfeeding for up to 2 years or longer whenever possible. Researchers also continue to find that involved grandparents can have a measurable positive impact on a child's development and survival. That doesn't mean ancient parenting was better. Modern medicine has saved millions of children's lives through vaccines, antibiotics, clean water, and advanced health care. But when it comes to the social environment surrounding children, our ancestors may have understood something we've partly forgotten. For hundreds of thousands of years, raising a child was never the responsibility of one exhausted parent, or even two. It was the responsibility of an entire community. If you step back and look at the bigger picture, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Human evolution didn't just produce larger brains or better tools. It also shaped an extraordinary system of cooperation. Grandparents stayed alive to help raise grandchildren. Fathers became more involved than in almost any other primate. Friends, relatives, and neighbors all became part of the same support network. That network may have been one of humanity's greatest survival advantages. For hundreds of thousands of years, children survived not because parents became stronger, but because communities became stronger. Knowledge about childcare was passed from one generation to the next, slowly improving the odds of survival with every generation. When you look at a newborn today, you're looking at a baby whose basic needs haven't changed very much since the Ice Age. Human babies are still born helpless. They still depend on touch, warmth, protection, and constant care. In many ways, their biology is almost identical to that of the children our ancestors carried across the African savanna. Perhaps that's why this story feels so familiar. Beneath all our technology, hospitals, and scientific advances, the most important ingredient in raising a child has remained remarkably consistent. Children thrive when they are surrounded by people who share the responsibility of helping them grow. So how did ancient humans keep kids alive? They carried them almost constantly. They breastfed them for years. They slept beside them. They shared childcare across entire communities. They learned from every success and every tragedy, passing that knowledge from one generation to the next. Fire helped humans survive. Tools helped humans hunt. Language helped humans cooperate. But cooperation itself may have been our greatest invention, because long before humanity built cities, kingdoms, or civilizations, it first learned how to protect its smallest and most vulnerable members. And without that extraordinary achievement, none of us would be here today.